What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Week 4 Monday Night Football is in the books, and so far, watching these Monday night doubleheaders, I've realized that only one out of the two games is worth watching. The first one is always unwatchable. Remember last week we had the bloodbath between the Bills and the Jags, and this week we had the honor of watching two backup quarterbacks struggle to sling the football. Mason Rudolph and Tyler Huntley. Mason Rudolph came in replace of Will Levis, who had to leave the game early with the injury, and he didn't really do too much. There's not really a quarterback controversy going on down there in Nashville. Will Levis should be the starter for next week. And the Dolphins, without Tua, it's hard to watch this team. But when you watch the Seattle Seahawks versus the Detroit Lions, though, it was must-watch television. There were points being scored left and right. The scoreboard was constantly blinking with the amount of touchdowns that were being scored. And there wasn't really a lot of defense being played, which means for a fun game to watch. And I'm going to be giving my reactions to both of these two games. But before we get into it, do me a favor. If you haven't already, smash that like button. Helps us rank higher in the YouTube search algorithm so we can grow. Remember to subscribe, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we go live and we drop new content. We are not just a YouTube channel. You can find this episode and all of our previous ones on all podcasting platforms: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. If you enjoy and you want to support the channel, support the grind, all we ask is that you give us a 5-star review. Giving us a 5-star review is the equivalent to donating $1,000 to the channel, man. Helps us out a lot. We greatly appreciate the support. Only takes 30 to 40 seconds to give us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple. So if you listen to podcasts, go ahead, subscribe to the JT Sports Podcast on all podcasting platforms. Follow us on Instagram at JT Sports _ and on X at JT Sports __. Let's dive into it. The Tennessee Titans walk out of South Florida with a 31-12 win over the Dolphins. There wasn't too much offense being scored in this game, and that was to be expected considering that the quarterback play for both of these two teams the last couple of weeks hasn't been that good. Will Levis, he has had his fair share of struggles being able to take care of the football. He exited this game early with the injury, but he made sure to give up another turnover before he left. Mason Rudolph came in and he didn't really do anything noteworthy. I don't expect there to be any quarterback controversy down there in Nashville because Mason Rudolph, he managed the game. He didn't have any turnovers, but he didn't do anything impressive to force a quarterback competition or a quarterback change to be made. Tony Pollard led the way for Tennessee. He had 88 rushing yards. He had a few big runs as well. He was pretty much Tennessee's only offense in this game. The passing offense, there wasn't really too much happening there. And one thing about Tennessee, even though they are 1-3, they easily could be undefeated right now if you had a quarterback who could do a better job of taking care of the football, which is why after watching this thing, I wasn't one of those people that was screaming Mason Rudolph needs to start over Will Levis, because even though Will Levis has a lot of boneheaded plays, he makes a lot of stupid, immature decisions with the football, he makes this offense more explosive when he's in that quarterback. You got a better chance of getting more big explosive plays in the passing game than what you do with Mason Rudolph, who is a check down Charlie. He takes what the defense gives him, isn't really going to take a lot of risks downfield. I'm a Steelers fan, so I'm really familiar with Mason Rudolph, and he played as you expected him to play as a backup. He's not going to lose you a game, but you probably won't win too many games unless the game that you played tonight is the style of football you plan on playing moving forward, just running the football, not really asking too much of the passing game. The Titans got a really outstanding defense. This has quietly been one of the best defenses in the NFL. They got a really good pass rush. They are a really aggressive defense. They really get after the quarterback. Meanwhile, for the Miami Dolphins side of things, without Tua, this team is unwatchable. And I understand now why Miami gave Tua all the money that he was asking for, because it's a night and day difference with this offense when Tua's in versus when he's missing time due to injuries. When Tua's in at quarterback for Miami, this is one of the more efficient, methodical offenses in the league. Even when this offense has their fair share of struggles, they're not just completely garbage like what they were tonight with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. And I love Tyler Huntley. By the way, he's a 9-5-4 legend right from around the corner of where Miami played at tonight. But, man, outside of a few good scrambles he had, it was tough sledding for him at quarterback. And I know that the Dolphins offensively are not going to be that good without Tua. But with Mike McDaniel being the offensive-minded coach, you expect for him to be able to elevate the quarterback play somewhat. Like a few weeks ago, Matt LaFleur, the head coach of the Green Bay Packers, was winning games with Malik Willis at quarterback. If LaFleur can win with Malik Willis, you mean to tell me that Mike McDaniel can't find any quarterback off the street to guide this team to a few wins? If the quarterback play is going to be this bad, you might as well go ahead and trade for Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston is probably the best backup quarterback that you can get without having to give up a lot of big draft compensation. You could probably get Jameis Winston for a 6th, maybe a 5th round pick right now. And with how bad this offense looks, you got to look at Mike McDaniel and you got to ask the question, if this dude is as good as a coach as what we initially thought during his first couple of seasons for Miami. Because outside of Tua, he's unable to elevate any quarterback. And when you specialize on the offensive side of the football, you should be able to help guys play better than what they actually are. That's why Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan are held in such a high regard, because they've been able to win despite not having their starting quarterback at times. And I believe that McDaniel is a really good coach, even though he comes off as a little bit of a nerd, a little bit of a geek. Y'all ever watch The Big Bang Theory? You remember Leonard? Yeah, that's who Mike McDaniel reminds me of. He reminds me a lot of Leonard. He talks a little bit like him as well, but I love Mike McDaniel. And if he has a capable quarterback, he's one of the better coaches in the league. But this offense is really one-dimensional. If you can't throw the football, you can't get the passing game going, the run game isn't going to have any success neither. Despite the talent that Miami has at running back, they are pretty good at that position. They got a lot of depth there. They're like 2-3 running backs deep. But if you can't throw the football and make the defense respect your ability to pass, all they're going to do is just load the box and go all out on stopping the run. And it's just a recipe for disaster when you just can't have somewhat of a passing game. And for the Dolphins moving forward, unless Tua is able to recover from that concussion, he doesn't have to retire, you're probably going to end up having the first pick in next year's draft with how bad this team looks offensively. And you got Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, who are frustrated on the sideline, but there's not really anything you can be frustrated about. The quarterback play is what it is. You got to find a way to scheme around it. Hell, if I was Mike McDaniel and I was calling the plays, if I can't get a quarterback, I'm going to just put Tyreek Hill, let him run wildcat quarterback. You got a better chance of generating more points doing that than what you do throwing out Skylar Thompson and Tyler Huntley. And I love me some Snoop. He is a former Pro Bowler, respected him, but man, it was tough watching the Dolphins offense tonight. This was an unwatchable game. And for both of these teams moving forward, the Tennessee Titans, I'm not writing them off yet. if they can find a way to correct some of the turnover issues with Will Levis, they definitely could turn their season around. They got a great defense. They got a lot of talent on that team. The offensive line is good. The receivers are really good as well. You got D-Pop, Calvin Ridley. You got a really good tight end as well. Some nice backs. I mean, if Will Levis can stop with the mistakes, Tennessee could find themselves being in the wild card hunt later on this season. That's only if he can take care of the football. But for Miami, depending on the time that Tua comes back, your season is probably over. And even if Tua can come back this year, you might be at a point where you are like 1-6, 1-7. You got no shot at making it into the playoffs. You might as well just let him miss the rest of the season. So next season, he can come back at full health. You don't have to worry about the durability concerns with him coming back during the season, because you might as well try to get that first overall pick, use that as trade bait so you can acquire more assets, and particularly to improve that offensive line, because they didn't do Snoop any favors out there. But the Titans get their first win of the season. They improved to 1-3, and the Dolphins, the nightmare continues without Tua. Wow, this was a really fun game to watch. The Detroit Lions take down Seattle at home. 42-29 was the final score. There were points being scored damn near every possession, man. And going into this game, I was excited to watch the matchup between the Seahawks' new head coach, Mike Macdonald, versus Detroit Lions offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson is in line to become a head coach next year. He's probably the best offensive coordinator in the league. And Mike Macdonald, is considered to be the Sean McVay of defensive coaches. He has a lot of great schemes. He's able to alter his scheme based off the opponent that he's playing on a week-to-week basis. But I didn't see the Seahawks defense look good tonight. As a matter of fact, this defense was completely terrible. They couldn't stop Jared Goff and that Lions offense to save their life. Jared Goff finished this game a perfect 18 of 18, completed 100% of his passes, 2 touchdowns, 292 yards through the air. And I understand that Seattle coming in had a boatload of injuries. They were down like 4 or 5 starters on the defense. Some of those guys being linebackers and defensive linemen. But when you're a defensive-minded coach and you specialize on this area of the football and you're considered to be the Sean McVay of defense, you should find a way to overcome some of those injuries and not to allow Detroit to score touchdowns on pretty much every single possession. It's like every time Detroit got the football, they were driving downfield. And I've been watching the Seattle Seahawks for a very long time, and I promise you, it's been about 10 years since I last seen the Seahawks put a good defense on the field. I haven't seen the Seahawks have an elite defense since I was in 7th grade. I just graduated college a few months ago, so that shows you how long it's been since Seattle has had a good defense. And not only is the defense still not that good, but when are they going to figure out the offensive line? It seems like that offensive line has been asked for about just as long as the defense has been garbage, man. And Geno Smith, I don't want to hear any of you Seahawks fans saying how Geno's the problem. They got to move on, because he was out there balling. He was running for his life. I never knew that Geno Smith had wheels. I never thought of Geno Smith as being a quarterback that can run around and extend plays. Well, he was out there looking like Michael Vick tonight. He was doing spinneroonies, running, breaking out of sacks. He was doing some damage with his legs, picking up a little bit of green when he had the opportunity to do so. Before you keep pointing the finger at Geno Smith being the reason for why the Seahawks have disappointed these last couple of years, fix the freaking offensive line first. Then let's see what Geno Smith can do when he has some serviceable protection up front. Because for the life of me, man, like, Geno Smith is not that bad as a quarterback as what a lot of people make him out to be. As a matter of fact, I think he is a above average quarterback. And when you give him a good offensive line, he can produce top 10 numbers for you. You got good receivers. Kenneth Walker and DK Metcalf, these dudes are ballers. DK Metcalf makes me glad that I'm not playing in the NFL, because imagine you being a defensive back and you got to cover the great Khali at wide receiver. I mean, DK Metcalf is one of the scariest dudes in the NFL in terms of his physique and how scary he looks running the football. Would you really want to be a defensive back? You're in the open field one-on-one and you got to make the tackle that saves your squad from giving up a TD? I wouldn't want to be doing that. I'd rather not play and just watch the games from a spectator standpoint, because DK Metcalf is just a freight train, and he makes me glad that I'm not out there playing in the NFL, because I know it has to be a hassle trying to get this dude down. And Kenneth Walker, with how good he was tonight, Seattle probably should have given him a little bit more touches, because with the offensive line struggling, you were more effective when you were just giving it to Kenneth Walker versus allowing Geno Smith to just get splattered back there. And he took one hit by Ozuruki, one of the defensive tackles for the Detroit Lions. And I thought Geno Smith was dead after that play, man. He got his body just absolutely laid all over the field after that one. Of course, he got flagged for roughing the passer. But when I watch Seattle's offense, I don't see anything that screams Geno Smith needs to be replaced. He needs to be benched. Could you do better? Absolutely. But he's one of those QBs that when you got the opportunity to draft a young guy in the upcoming draft, you go ahead, bring him in, and you let him sit and learn behind Geno for a year or two until Geno just completely fizzles out and he's unstartable anymore. But I don't get why Seahawks fans keep saying they need to replace Geno Smith. He balled out tonight. The Seahawks defense was completely unbearable. And it's the biggest reason why they lost this game. Even when they were able to get back into it and make it a one-possession game, you couldn't depend on the defense to do too much of anything. And the reason why I think they went for it on that two-point conversion is because they were thinking if they got it and they were able to get a stop some way, somehow defensively, they were going to be able to score again, because the Lions defense wasn't too much better in this game. So you score again and you're up by 1 point. And maybe by that point, they expected the game to be over with and they could just run out the rest of the clock. I don't know what their logic was with going for that two-point conversion. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me, because either way, you're still down. You feel me? And just the risk that goes with taking that two-point conversion. If you don't get it, you're down 8. And if you would have scored again, you would have had to make another one. And if you didn't get it, then, the game still would have been out of reach. So I don't really understand the decision-making by Mike McDonald to go for that two-point conversion. And moving forward for the Seahawks, I have some concerns about just how good is this team, because they're 3-1, and when you see that 3-1 record, you would think that they're one of the best teams in the NFC, but this may be one of those situations where you got a team that isn't as good as what their record may say they are. You got a few good wins against some of the worser teams in the league this year, the Patriots, the Dolphins, but this was your first game against an actual good opponent. And you didn't live up to the hype defensively that Mike McDonald had coming into this season, because even with guys being out, allowing the team to score on pretty much every possession and hang 42 on you is unacceptable when you're a defensive-minded coach. And Matt Eberflus, he dealt with a lot of injuries during the first half of last season, and his defenses weren't giving up 30 burgers like this. This was embarrassing. To call yourself a defensive-minded coach and for Ben Johnson and Jared Goff to just cook up like this, Mike McDonald has to go back home, look in the mirror, and reevaluate himself and reevaluate what he's doing on that side of football. Because even if you are healthy, I don't see the defense being all that more improved than what we saw tonight. And the Lions, showed us why they are one of the best teams in the NFC. This offense, we know Jared Goff is out there humming, and Jameson Williams, he had a big play. It's nice to see Jameson Williams having a breakout season, because when the Lions took him in the first round out of Alabama a few years ago, there were definitely a lot of moments where you thought this dude was a bust, between him getting injured, him having to miss a little bit of action due to the whole gambling suspension that the NFL gave out to him. You always wondered if he just was a wasted pick, but this year he actually is having a really good season. He's an explosive deep threat, and he's looking as good as what he did when he was playing for Alabama. And the Lions moving forward offensively, this is probably going to be a top 5 offense this year. You got a great offensive line. We know how good David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are at running back, and your receivers with the emergence of Jameson Williams, it's really hard to stop this offense. And you got Ben Johnson calling the plays. Enjoy this dude while you have him, because he's going to be the Jaguars head coach next year. He's going to be fixing up Trevor Lawrence, and he's going to bring glory to the city of Duval. And yes, I am a little bit biased because I do love the Jaguars. So I love Ben Johnson as the OC. I'm hoping that he ends up being the Jaguars' new head coach. Defensively for Detroit, you got some major problems. If Aiden Hutchinson gets blocked, which is something that doesn't really happen that much, this dude has been insane this year. He is the clear front runner for Defensive Player of the Year, and he has put himself in that same tier of pass rushers with guys like TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. Aiden Hutchinson has become one of them ones that you got to triple team, double team, quadruple team at times if you want to be able to have a chance of giving your quarterback some protection, because he was harassing Geno Smith back there. He was throwing guys around like he was the Rock, and he was going up against Hornswoggle, just rock bottoming guys, just choke slamming dudes to the ground. It's fun to watch Aiden Hutchinson. This dude has really matured as a pass rusher. He has a bevy of moves that he can put on you. He has a really quick get off. You got to start talking more about Aiden Hutchinson when you're ranking your top 5 pass rushers in the game, because he definitely is up there with Max Crosby and TJ Watt and Myles Garrett, man. You got to have him up there. Here's a tier 1 pass rusher now in the league. But outside of him and the guys that they have getting after the quarterback, their secondary still isn't that good. Terrion Arnold, they spent the first round pick on him out of Alabama in this past year's draft. And this dude is a holding and PI machine, man. Every time he's guarding the receiver, they go his way. It seems like a flag is being thrown. Maybe the Detroit Lions just don't know what elite cornerbacks look like. Because the last time they drafted a cornerback in the first round, it was Jeff Okudah out of Ohio State. And we know how his career has panned out. I think he's a backup cornerback on the Houston Texans. So the Lions, maybe they just don't have a clean eye when it comes to evaluating cornerbacks. You have the Rickershaw dude in there as well. Your second round pick out of Mizzou, he didn't really do too much. So this secondary is still a work in progress. You didn't have Brian Branch. He was out in this game. But defensively, with the amount of praise that people throw Aaron Glenn's way, the Lions DC, this defense doesn't always play up to the amount of praise that he seems to get. He's always a finalist for a good amount of head coaching jobs, but I don't see it with Aaron Glenn as the defensive coordinator. I really don't. Maybe he's a high character guy and players love playing under him. He's able to get the most out of dudes. He's a good leader. Maybe he's one of those raw kind of defensive coordinators. Maybe not a good play caller, but one of those guys that his players play hard for him. But this Lions defense, they definitely need improved play out of Terrion Arnold. I agree with what Troy Aikman was saying during the broadcast. They're in practice next week. You got to end up giving this dude some mitts and not allowing him to hold or grab for the entirety of the week throughout practice, man, because this dude is just a penalty merchant. And obviously, he's struggling to make the transition from the college game to the pros, because in college, you can be a little bit more handsy. You can get away with a lot of the grabbing that you can't get away in the NFL. And it also helps that with how the field in college is kind of constructed, you got wider margins. you have the ability to allow the sideline to help you out as well. And that's why you see a lot of cornerbacks who are good in college not translating to NFL, because in the NFL, the field is more condensed. So you don't have wide margins or wide hashes like what you do at the collegiate level. And oftentimes, cornerbacks that look shut down in college, it's thanks to those margins, being able to use that sideline to help them out. But in the NFL, you can't really do that. So for Terry and Arnold, man, you got to step up, because they really need him to be prime time for them this season if they are going to make a Super Bowl run. Because let's say you got to end up going up against the Vikings in the NFC Championship. Do you have a cornerback who can slow down Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison? Do you have a cornerback who can slow down the Green Bay Packers wide receivers? And it looks like the Detroit Lions are still lacking that. Carlton Davis, he's nice. I wouldn't consider him a shutdown corner, but he's a pretty above average corner. But you need somebody like Terry Arnold to step up and really become that lockdown dude, because you're going to be in for a rude awakening once you get into the postseason, and you got guys who are capable of being able to block Aiden Hutchinson and just go to work on your secondary. But for the Lions moving forward, this was an impressive win. I expect Seattle to be one of the better teams in the NFC. I thought they would be able to win the NFC West, but with how bad that defense looked tonight, I might have to go back on that prediction. And if you're a Seahawks fan, I know that you had some injuries, but having injuries doesn't excuse you having a defensive-minded coach that allowed 42 points to be hung up on them. The Lions ain't even need to kick a field goal. They were scoring touchdowns on every possession. It's like you were playing Madden on rookie difficulty out there if you were Ben Johnson and Jared Goff and whoever else on that offense. So the Lions get the win. They improved to 3-1 on the season. The Seahawks suffered their first defeat of the year. And this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Do me a favor real quick before you head on out. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content. Follow us on Instagram at JTSports_, on X at JTSports__. Give the podcast a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify if you enjoy. Share this episode with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. And I will see you guys shortly with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast.